try to argue about their phones, and then they put selfies on them.
I thought you were supposed to like take things away and give them back at the end of the year or something.
You know, if
So,
everyone
10
has
years
the
ago
same
now.
pencil and 5 people leave it, I have no clue whose it is. So I just put it into the jar where anyone can grab a pencil or a pen.
That seems practical.
I had a insulated mug for at least a week, which is it. Finally,
So apparently the Wi-Fi bill.
What's that?
Apparently the
I
network.
just started at Marshwood.
Okay, let me come and take a look.
It's over in Central.
unfortunate time.
Can I grab like my short of it?
Yeah, sure.
That's fine for a job there. I didn't, I'm not certified.
Yeah, I just had to adjust that. Long road.
Sorry.
First started in Massachusetts.
Actually, I might have
All
missed it.
Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah.
Got the end, moved, started all over, it took about 5 years. So it's my first year of teaching where I'm not having to do that. Which is nice.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody noticed last time, but I set up a stream mostly to record the class in case somebody wanted to watch it again later, but eventually we're kind of moving in a direction where if people wanted to tune in on the classes from far away, we would like to be able to support that. I don't know if anybody's interested, but I have the computer set up back here that's going to run the stream. It's got the webcam. It's pointed mostly at me, so you don't have to be in frame if you don't want to be. But it's a little hard for me to be up there talking and back here at the same time, and it kind of adds to the stream if somebody is actually working on this computer, because you can switch between the webcam and the actual screen of the computer so that that actually gets included in the content. So would anybody be interested in working on my computer over here? And yeah?
One of these guys wants to do it.
Jorgen, since he doesn't.
Oh yeah.
He has a Linux.
Right. Jorgen, how you doing? Totally don't have a task for you or anything.
Me? What's my task?
Do you still have a, hey, welcome back. Do you still have a Linux machine?
Yeah.
How do you feel about working on my Mac?
On a Mac?
Yeah.
Why?
Do you feel like this is a trap or something?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so here's the deal. Yeah, so I have the stream going,
Uh-huh.
and I'm going to be up there,
Uh-huh.
right? And so if you don't mind being here and switching occasionally between what you're doing and the camera, then everybody can sort of be included in the class, right? The stream is recorded for posterity. How do you feel about that?
Sure.
Can I show you how it works?
Yeah.
You ever used OBS before?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just have 3 scenes set up here. Okay. Number 3, that's just command 3, is just the splash screen. Command 2 is this window right here, which is already sized. So like this area is off the OBS stream, so it's just right here. And then this is the webcam 24, so you can just see a little bit of it here, so you can tell the scene there. So if you don't mind, like, you know, if I'm explaining something, having it on me, and then just switching over while you're working, sure, then that would be super helpful.
Okay.
Do you
want me to work here?
Yeah.
I have a question. Oh, we can switch over to be next to you, Jorgen.
All right.
Cool. Thank you. Really
Is
appreciate it.
that?
Can I borrow a mouse?
There should be a pile of my joints somewhere.
Yeah, we don't.
You brought a mouse back.
This is always in my bag.
It clearly wasn't last time.
Didn't seem like it was last time.
I can take my mouth pad out too if it'll make you feel better.
Look at this little shit.
Ah, that's
sideways.
Hey. Yes, you
I would like to.
What?
I would like to see no press on that.
I only have
They have
two
gold.
old razor blades. You can tell it's the old.
I worked a lot of time on this one thing, and I want to use it.
Yep, that's no problem at all.
Like,
There's a couple ways that we can do it, depending on what you want to kick off.
no longer.
If you don't mind kicking off at the end of the class, and then we can prepare the quick job on Monday.
Yes.
The software you need. We can also do it in break, but then you can download and install the software.
Yeah, I can do it
Big
there.
printer.
Alright,
No,
I'll
that
be
is
up
a piece that goes in the back.
And it's pretty big
Printer
as well.
holds-
Okay, how big?
It's like 6 inches by like.
So I asked him, like,
Okay.
I printed the 3D printer, and I returned the original 3D printer.
What are you printing? He's printing the Cobra Mark.
Oh no.
With a stand, a custom built stand. I spent like, oh my god.
That's gonna require some.
By the way, he didn't model that, was it? I did not model that.
You just ripped the file.
I did that.
We're working up to that.
We're working to not ripping the file.
Yeah.
Ripping the files is the best strategy.
Except if there isn't one file. Then no.
No, rip the file from the game and turn it into an STL file. What else would you do?
It's not from a game.
Find it.
Suffer.
But you can also just.
I like how there is no grade.
What?
You must be really zoomed in or really zoomed out.
Not
Toggle.
I don't know. I'm sure there is one.
Oh, there you go. Found it. Alright, I thought I could go to the whole class without food, but I need my food. I'll find my fork. Alright, going back to get your key. Yeah, so have fun.
Alright, everybody.
He spilled it all over
That's
everywhere.
he's grabbing his quiche.
It's on the car, by the way. It's not in
Oh,
the
well, he better go out and rescue it then.
And he has,
I mean, the chances of that quiche still being there when the class is over.
he
Next
spilled
to zero.
it, like, all over the car.
Okay, so,
Car.
welcome back, everybody, or, welcome for the first time. Yeah, Lois left, just all over. Oh, wait. Yeah. How y'all doing? Did you have a good week?
Good.
Yeah? Did you think of nothing but 3D modeling the whole time you were away?
Absolutely.
I thought about wanting
I
to
thought
3D
of
model.
nothing but 3D modeling. My brain didn't even think about breathing. All I thought of was 3D modeling.
Wow.
Nothing really in my
That's-
mind.
that's-
Just 3D modeling and how the heck I can do other stuff on this.
Okay, well, that's the kind of enthusiasm we're looking for.
I also thought it was 10% about me.
Okay. So, did anybody have a chance to play around at all in 3D modeling in the past week? Yeah?
A little bit.
Yeah? Yeah? I know you do. That's great. How did it feel? Did you remember anything from class? Couple
Yes.
things? Yeah? Thumbs up? Alright, that's good. Let's see. So we're gonna go into a couple of new things this week. But by the end of this class, you guys are gonna be halfway through this intro class. You're gonna be halfway to like fully fledged, crazy modeling experts, if I have my way. And that's pretty cool. I was really happy with how things went last week. Hopefully you guys got a little bit out of it.
Okay.
We're gonna shift things up a little bit starting, well, it depends on how far we get tonight, but definitely next class. I might have mentioned this last week, I don't normally like to stand up here and like lecture, and like tell you guys what to do. That's not generally what I consider a fun way to convey knowledge, but to kind of get you guys over the initial hump of learning this program, that's necessary to an extent. But starting next week, you guys are gonna start working a little bit more independently on a couple of things. Where I would like to get to in some measure or another by the time we're done with the fourth class is have you guys either well on your way or have completed a design of your own, right? And we'll talk, if we have enough time, we'll talk for a few minutes at the end of class, just so you guys can start thinking about what that would be. But basically just taking the things you learned last class and the things you learned this class and kind of put it together in a way that allows you to kind of be creative and come up with your own thing. And I can help you guys get them printed out or whatever if you want to take a video or what have you. But just you know, something tangible that you guys are creating. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for by the end of the class. Welcome back. Was Keish still there?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I had to find my
We are
phone.
Keish enabled.
Under the seat.
Okay, so let's see. I'll just try to show you guys something new or different or interesting each week. This thing serves no functional purpose whatsoever. I just made it because I thought it looked cool. Has anybody seen one of these before? Anybody know what that is? He knows what this is. Yeah, it's a vacuum tube. So way back, like a million years ago, like this is like what they used in electronic devices. Anybody know what a transistor is? This is what came before transistors. These like are high voltage and breakable and expensive and get really hot and are generally not considered to be portable. So that's why when they invented transistors, like electronics were revolutionized. But that is totally aside. I just think they look cool. So I made a model of like a rocket base that the vacuum tube plugs into, and it just makes it look like, I don't know, some sort of cartoonish like missile or bomb or something like that. But the reason I brought this out is to get those two pieces to fit together like that and fit together snugly, like it only goes in one way, it's indexed and doesn't fall out, right? That design, that pattern that it plugs into had to be really precise. And that's the kind of thing we're going to be talking about today. If you're making functional parts, you need to be able to get that kind of accuracy. You don't have to nail it the first time. You can do it, mess it up, and revise it and get it, you know, eventually. That's fair game. But being able to work towards that sort of accuracy is important if you're going to do something like design and build a robot, or design a replacement part to fix your parents' blender, or you know, whatever. So we're going to be kind of moving in on that sort of accuracy tonight. So that's what we're gonna do. Somebody want to cast up to one or both of these screens, and we'll go through an exercise together. There's a step that we skipped last week. Who's being our happy volunteer here? Nice. Okay. So can you actually, do you have Fusion running? Can you switch over?
Yeah, I am switched over.
Okay, so you need to cast your whole desktop. So the way that you do that is if you go back to Chrome and you go back to the cast menu, there's a little thing down at the bottom that says sources. You can choose that and select desktop. And then recast your desktop and you should.
Is the other one on, Joe?
What's that?
Is the other TV on?
Maybe not.
Connection
Let's fix it.
lost.
Yeah, that's me.
They're connected. Your device is lost. Try typing.
Oh, running.
They are running, by the way.
No. I mean, I tried, but it didn't work.
There now.
Oh, wow. That's magical. If somebody else wants to go up here, that's open as well.
Make them up.
Okay, so, is that you?
Yeah, I've changed over, but it's still struggling to get there.
When
As
you
can
move the
see, I've
mouse,
clicked
does the mouse move?
I've clicked the X button already. I'm on a different screen.
Oh, that's because you're close to Chrome.
Oh, I can't close Chrome?
Yeah.
No,
What
you're
do you think?
Chromecasting. Let me.
Alright,
This is quickly moving from Fusion, intro to Fusion to intro to text.
Intro to basic logic.
Hey, there we go.
Intro to Chrome. Guys, the Fusion won't work. It
I like
closed it.
Why is there so much stuff on your desktop?
There's not a lot.
That was not a lot of
I know,
stuff.
I'm kidding. You should see my. Actually, every time I'm gonna record a video or like anything like that,
Yes,
I
I
take
like
everything
that.
that's in my desktop and I dump it in a folder.
Jack.
It's
had it.
gone. It's gone.
Jack, you fool.
Okay. Okay, while Jack is working on that, does somebody want to cast up here?
I'm trying.
Yeah, but.
Yeah.
I got a question while you're working on that.
What's
Thinking
that?
about end product stuff.
Okay.
This is gonna, whatever I design here is gonna spit out a file that we can 3D print on, but
Yeah.
what about if I wanna carve something out of styrofoam
Yeah,
or
sure.
mold something out of like a resin or something
Yep,
like that?
that's a great question. So, Fusion is cool and versatile because you can sort of produce a digital file that can be used in all those different like manufacturing methods. Do you have access to like a CNC machine?
I guess that's what I'm asking is like, where can I do that?
Shameless plug.
Yeah.
There's a place called Port City Makerspace, about
Yep.
a mile from here.
Okay.
And they have a couple of CNC machines. They have a small laser cutter. They have 3D printers. There's all that stuff. And so you know you can put up with those guys.
Jeff, I'm on screen. Right.
Okay.
Great. Okay. So yes, that would be a great place to do it.
You
got,
like.
Those things specifically, I'm talking like carbon like styrofoam.
Yeah,
Or-
they have CNC machines that can,
That'll do
that
that.
can carve foam. Yep.
Cool.
Yep. Foam, metal, soft
Jack, no,
metal,
don't touch
wood.
anything except click on
And then,
fusion.
and then yeah, like casting or something out of
Click on
plastic. to
fusion.
make it- Would I print that and then make a cast of it if I wanted
A lot of
like?
people do this. Some good YouTube videos on that very topic.
Nothing.
Okay, so let's get Fusion up over here.
Oh, my Windows casting is mean. That's not gonna work.
Huh?
You guys want the old people to
That's
do
not
it?
gonna work. My
Yeah,
casting
should I jump
is
in? I'll jump in.
Oh, Jack's back to the browser.
It stops.
It says I'm casting to both.
I'm working on the right one.
Yeah. I am both, according to this.
No.
Only one has three school teams.
Yeah, you can override it, like if you click on the little blue thing and then click it again to cast.
Jack, why don't you try doing it through Windows? I'm back.
That looks promising.
Alright, the old people have a kid.
Okay, alright.
Jack, finally did it.
Alright, good job everybody.
Touch
I
anything.
knew we could get through this together. Okay, so one of the things that I kept forgetting to tell people last time falls under the category of good habits that you want to build. Remember how we would create a sketch and then extrude it, or create a sketch and revolve it, or whatever. That's fine for when you're first learning the program. But whenever we're designing a part, we should always create what's called a component first. Okay? A component organizes your sketches and your bodies all together, and it becomes really important later when we doing okay?
My
It becomes
computer's
really.
chunking. 70%.
Is that you?
Oh,
or is
it
that
just
you?
worked. No, that's Jack.
Okay, alright.
I'm on the
Just
stop.
It becomes really important later on when you've got multiple components that you're working on at the same time. And it can get really confusing when you create, for example, a new sketch, what part that sketch is associated with. So for now, yeah, you're doing okay. So for now, I just want you to get in the habit before you start drawing your part. Let's create a new component, okay? So if you go, yeah, can we?
Okay, this is Jack's. I'm
This is
chill.
right.
Yeah, is this you?
Yes, this is
Okay,
me.
so can you go through the create menu? Yep. See the option to create a new component? Okay, yeah, click on that. Now you can name it if you want to, or you can just leave it as component one. Doesn't really matter. But hit OK so that we get a new component that shows up in our tree over there, okay? Now when we create any sketches and we take, operations on those sketches, they're all going to be part of that component. And we'll probably get to an example next week where that actually becomes really important, but for now, just take it up there. Okay, so for our first example of designing a part that actually has like precise dimensions to it, we're going to make a mount. Have people seen these before? Have you seen one of these before? This is called a servo. It's like a little motor. You might control it with an Arduino, or it might be part of an RC car or RC plane. And these motors, instead of just like spinning like you're driving a car, they go to set positions. So you use it to like move the flaps in an airplane, or open and close the hand in a robot, something like that. So if we're going to design something that's going to allow you to mount this to a frame or something like that, we have to design a part that's going to fit this fairly snugly. And it's also going to have the provision to put a couple of screws in to hold it in place, right? So we get a couple of things there that we need to locate in just the right places, okay? Let's see. Here,
Yeah.
have a thing.
I want that.
You can give it to him. You guys can share.
Give me
Give
the
it to
thing.
him.
Give me the thing. Give
So
me
we're
that.
going to take a couple of measurements on this part, okay? Now these sets of calipers in the red cases, these are always here at Lowest Lab. So if you guys are working on a project, you want to do some modeling, you got to take some measurements, feel free to come in and use these, okay? You want to help me out and do some measurements? Okay, so when I'm getting ready to design a part like this, I do something that's a little bit old school. You don't have to do this, but I find it really helpful. I actually draw out what I'm going to be designing before I start drawing it in Fusion. That sounds a little bit weird, but we're gonna go through and measure a bunch of features on this thing, and it helps me to write them all down, and then I can just model very quickly, okay? So I'm gonna do a little sketch over here on the board, as we're talking through this, and hopefully you guys will be able to see it. So, Gordon, can you take a measurement on the outside width of that servo? So what I mean is, the dimension, yeah, that long dimension.
Next to you, so I'm closer.
Oh, you can, what? Sure. Yeah, so if the servo looks, I'm gonna draw big here. If the servo looks kind of like this, okay, I want to know the dimension here, the outside dimension under the little ears where the screws go.
So it's getting 22.8.
Okay, so we'll call that 23. So that's going to be 23 millimeters here.
Sounds like it.
Did you get something kind of vaguely close to that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And then, how about this dimension right here? So from under those little flanges that stick out down to the bottom?
Under the plan?
Yeah,
So that would be more of this thing?
yeah. Hey, you've
19.
used these before.
No, I haven't.
Really? Well, then you do it.
Last week, would that be in sort of lined up? Like that?
Yeah, exactly. What do you got?
18.
Okay, what do we call that, 19?
All right.
Okay, so Gordon did something really interesting there. On the calipers there, you got one side, the side that's kind of pointing towards you right now, you use to measure the outsides of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other side you can use to measure the insides of things, so he used that to measure under that flange down to the bottom.
I just use the depth because you have the solid edge and
We're gonna use that a little bit more.
Hey, always use that.
So, actually, may I have that back for a second? So what I'm saying is, you can use this side to measure the insides of things, and you can use this side to measure the outsides of things. Does that make sense?
I just like this one more.
Tell me your thing.
Okay, so we have 23 millimeters, we have 19 millimeters. How about the distance between the two holes?
Just.
The inside or outside diameter?
Yeah, so when we're actually creating a model, I'm gonna move over here for a second because actually that's gonna be harder to see. There's a really tricky thing to do in modeling, or rather when trying to reproduce a model. Let's say we have two holes in a part like this, okay? If we wanna reproduce the spacing of these two holes, the important dimension is the center of this hole to the center of this hole. Like that's how we draw it. But it's really hard to measure the center of a hole. He's probably struggling with that back there right now.
What? No,
It's-
this
it's
is,
hard-
I'm just admiring the caliper.
Nice. It's hard to measure the center of a hole. Like, how do you know? We're trying to get down to like, a millimeter or a fraction of a millimeter accuracy. How do you measure from the center of that hole to the center of that hole? You can get close, but you can't tell when the point of the calipers is right over the hole. Anybody get an idea? If anybody's ever like framed a house, you might have figured this one out.
Don't.
Well, okay. Yep, that would work, but there's an easier way. What do you got?
Well, I didn't quite get what he said, but you could measure the distance from the closest points on the two circles and then measure the diameter of the circles.
Oh, yes, that would work. But there's actually an even quicker way. What do you got?
So do it just from the rightmost point of
That's
one
my
circle,
Yeah, here.
and then like the inside part of the other circle.
Here?
Like there, yeah.
Well, golly, why is that gonna work?
Because like it cancels out itself when you measure it. and
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a hole. There's a
So the
gap.
distance from this edge of this hole to the
Like,
distance of
if
this
you
edge of
go
this
so
hole.
But it
far
still
around
won't work.
Yeah, is the same distance as it is from the center to the center. But measuring from the edges with a point of the calipers is way easier than measuring the center of a hole, where you can't really tell where you are. So what you can do is just, yep, you can just kind of hook the point of one caliper on the inside edge of one hole and then kind of extend it down until it's right about the edge of the other hole. And that looks like about 27 millimeters. I think you're a little bit over. Did you get something similar? Did you get about 27?
Yep.
Okay. So, well, this picture's getting really kind of weird, but we'll roll with it. So 27 millimeters. That one comes up all the time. That's kind of why I took the time to explain that. You're measuring a pair of mounting holes and you're making a part to fit that mounting hole. Having to figure out the center to center measurement between mounting holes is a super common thing to have to do. And like just measuring from the same edge to the same edge just makes it totally trivial. let's see, what else do we need to know?
The holes are 2 millimeters.
Yeah, we do. So if we look at the top,
Not that that matters.
down, this servo's getting wider and wider every time I draw it, but anyway. Let's see, so we actually want, I guess, we want this width, right? Sorry, I'm standing in front of my drawing. We want the thickness of the thing when you're looking down at it. The thickness.
What's the number?
12, alright, we'll call that 12, I guess? I don't know, does it feel like?
12 point.
Yeah, let's call it 12 and a half. We don't want to undersize it. Okay.
Looks like the measurement.
Cool. So we have the important dimensions for making a mount for this thing, yeah?
So the thing with the diameters from like one side to the other side that you were talking about,
Yeah.
that only works if the circles are the same size, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Very good point. That it is relatively uncommon in my experience to do this sort of thing and have holes that are different size, but that's a really good point. If you're measuring, if you're trying to recreate a wall and you're measuring center to center, and holes like this and ones like this, it's not gonna work. So,
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
actually, is it? No, it's not gonna work.
No.
No.
Okay, so now you guys get to see how bad of a drawer I am. So if we were gonna draw a mount for this thing, I think the way it should look is basically a 3D body that'll wrap around the servo. Okay? This is
That's the
my
servo.
really poor attempt to draw perspective.
Can I look at that servo?
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see.
You're close.
Oh, angles. Oh boy. Okay.
You almost had it.
It's
Just that one line.
This one here?
That looks great.
All lines of perspective are parallel.
Yeah, the problem is that I don't know that they're parallel, the problem is I can't draw. Alright, there's gonna be a mounting hole here and a mounting hole here, and then we also need kind of like a flange sticking off the edge that we're gonna use to mount that to our like robot frame or something like that, okay? So this is sort of like roughly what we're gonna be drawing, okay? And now that we know sort of the big shape we're going for and dimensions, we can go ahead and put it together, okay?
How about a spot for this wire?
Yeah, thank you. What's that?
How about a spot for this wire?
Oh, well spotted, sir.
Wait, what wire?
So take a look.
Ah,
Yeah,
yes.
take a look at this part right here. I don't know if I posted it to the Discord yet. I'll post it at the end of class, but I made a video of kind of the stuff we're going over today, so you guys can refer to it later if you want to. That was my first iteration of the part. And you know what I didn't put in?
The hole in the wire.
Exactly. So you go to try the part out, it doesn't fit because you didn't leave a spot for the wire. So that was going to be a discussion about revising parts, but you skipped right over that because you're too quick. And so we'll add that in when we get
We
to
revise
when we
stuff
get
on
to
the fly
part.
a lot.
Yeah. So then, actually, so when you add that in, it looks like this. And so I go through that process in the video. Okay, so let's. Why don't we actually start drawing that part? So who's this again? Who's up here? Okay. So can you start a new sketch? And let's start with a rectangle, right? That's going to represent the top-down dimension of, or the length and width of the servo that we're going to build the mount around. Okay.
Are we gonna build the servo in the program and then make a mount around it?
That is an excellent question. I do that sometimes, but only when it's a complicated part. For this example, we can skip over that.
Okay.
But that's a really good question. There are times where that's a really valuable and important thing to do. And maybe next class or the class after that, we're going to talk about assemblies, which is where you can have multiple components and you join them together in the program. You can even do like mechanisms that move and model the movement and the limits of movement and stuff like that. In cases like that, it's really helpful to build a model of a part and then use that to determine where the other parts, you know, how they're shaped and stuff. In this case, though, since this is basically like a block, we can get away with skipping.
Okay.
What was his question? I'm sorry.
Are we going to build a model of the servo in the program and then use that to build the mount?
Gotcha.
Yeah, which I definitely do sometimes. Okay, so let's make a rectangle, and the rectangle is going to represent this pocket in here in the part. So that's going to be 12.5 meters like tall and 23 millimeters wide. Okay, so can you do a rectangle that's 23 millimeters by 12.5 millimeters?
The center rectangle, or does it matter?
You know, whatever makes you feel good.
23
that way.
23 by what?
23 the other way, do 12 and a half that way, just so it sort of tracks with what we sketched on the board. So do 12 and a half that way, and 23 that way,
Oh, it's not
and,
to point anywhere.
and if at any point you need a hint or a mark. How do you, what?
You're not allowed to make it.
So
Bro, we gonna
you,
extrude this. I finna extrude
so
this
to
shit.
set the dimensions, you actually set it on it.
I'm gonna
So
press
see
E
how
on
it
it,
gives you the 17
and then I'm gonna go up.
So if you want a 12 and a half in this way,
19.
you can just type 12 and a half. So, well, like while
Bro.
it's highlighted here.
Bro.
You do 12 and a half. And then to go, and then you can just hit tab to go over to the
What are you
17.
doing?
And make that one 23. And then hit
I
enter.
want to do it the other way so it makes it
All right, so you got your 12 and a half by 23
I do.
rectangle here. Why are you a little tilted?
I accidentally grabbed the orbit tool.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure it actually was a rectangle, because if it wasn't rectangular, we were gonna have trouble later. Okay, so the next thing we wanna do is draw this shape right here. So this is the outside of the mount, okay? So I'm gonna arbitrarily decide that, the width of the mount is gonna be 5 millimeters. So can you, actually, do you mind if I kind of guide you a little bit here?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So hit escape to get rid of the rectangle tool. And use the line tool, so go to the create menu and choose line. Now this is not the only way to do this. This is just how I'm going to illustrate it this time. Okay? So yeah, start there. So click there to start the line, and then go off to the left by 5 millimeters.
Jeff, where's the line tool?
Create
Yep.
line. L is the shortcut for it. Part way down. Okay, so you get 5 millimeters. Click to end that line. Okay. Now go straight up. Keep it 90 degrees.
My top one's
Did you find it? Oh, you need to be in sketch mode first, so go to create.
Oh,
Yep, and then the line will be on.
okay. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
You betcha. Okay, so straight up, now if you want to go 5 millimeters past this top line, right? So if you were 12 and a half here, you want to go what, 17 and a half?
Yep.
Good job. So click to end that line. Yep, then keep going across. So how far is that one going to be?
Well, it's gonna be 30, 23 plus 5, so 28.
It would be 28 if you wanted to stop here, because you already are 5 out over here.
Oh, so 30.
Yep.
What? No.
Yep.
Huh?
You're right.
33.
33. So we're using.
I bet. Quick math.
So you can actually, if you double click down in here, you'll go back into that.
You
You
do
all the work right.
Line, go back.
I was just doing
he's
I was just
drawing
trying to
the
do
line.
that.
How far is this long one?
Yeah, technically.
So if you go up to create menu.
I'm just starting right.
Alright, it goes 7.5 down,
Sorry,
right?
it's on the bottom left hand corner of the
And
page.
so we started here.
I'm assuming they're.
Oh, that's where we started. Okay.
I think so.
Come out 5 millimeters.
Maybe.
Yep, and then click again. And
I
then
don't know that
up
far.
and you go there plus.
Well, the young guys.
Oh, it's just like 4 48.
So wait, he's over 5.
Oh,
Thirty.
we gotta
Oh, yes.
Let me get it. Bro, it's gonna only be like.
Mine just mine just auto-filled it.
Okay, is everybody sort of in a vague place near what we got up on the screen
So
here?
we're over 5 millimeters from the bottom left hand corner.
I didn't do anything.
We're
just
up
did it.
33,
Yep,
and then
so it was.
Oh, yeah.
No,
No,
not up 33.
17 and a half,
17 and a
To do
half.
what?
33,
To do what?
17 and a half, and then reconnect down to the
Just outer
bottom.
bit? That's just the lines we made.
Alright,
Everything's the line tool, all 90 degrees to each other.
Well, I didn't do that.
If you're stuck, don't be shy, so come over and look over your shoulder.
I'm up on the right over there.
Oh, there you are. Oh, cool. Okay, so it looks, yeah, so what you want to do is go back, you somehow got,
Click the top on the little square.
oh, you're still in sketch mode.
Yeah.
Yeah, click on the top of the cube there. The little
The
orbiting
little,
area.
it'll come up as a little bomb that says.
See where it says top on top of the cube?
Got it, thank
Click
you.
on it? Yep, there you go.
Silence.
You can rotate it if you want.
I just wanted to zoom out a little bit, right? 'Cause I need to see.
Yep, that's totally fine.
0.05, right?
And then go back into the line tool.
That was crazy. Over.
Got it.
Yep.
So I went over 5, correct?
Well, you already got that
Bro,
first
you
line, yeah,
ain't
so
on
click
dark mode.
there. To start your line, go off to the right.
Just to go around your.
How far?
Well, it's gonna be 12.5 plus 5, so
But you
17.
have these things?
Yeah.
Sim though. I don't need a sim
And then
My head hair is.
go down, it's gonna be 23
Ooh,
plus
actually
5
measure.
plus 5, so 33. Yeah,
Everything closes
and then
here.
back across,
17.5.
yeah,
It's
17.5,
the zero
and
button.
then go back up to reconnect with your rectangle.
The zero button.
Alright, you guys are doing great. So, once you get that sketched out, go ahead and click finish sketch and you go back into 3D land, okay? And now let's extrude, you can leave the interior box alone, right, but extrude the outside C shape up the height of the lower part of the circle, which is 19 millimeters. Yep. Right, so what we've done then, if we look back to our little drawing over here, we've created this section here, right? Yeah?
Yes.
Yep, that looks great. Yep, that's looking good.
And how high do you want to go?
Okay, so you don't wanna select the interior part, you wanna select the outside part, so you can click it again to deselect it.
Why?
The blue, yeah, and then click the outside part. Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Do you not have a closed, you
Look at
don't
the
have a
screen.
closed shape for some reason? Okay. So, hey everybody, see up here on Marcus's
That bottom
screen,
line is like blue.
the inside is kind of shaded orange and the outside is not, okay? When you draw a 2D shape like this and it's closed, like all of the lines interconnect and it's an enclosed shape, it shades it in orange to let you know that, okay? For some reason Marcus is not.
What am I missing?
Well, let's find out. So if you double click to open up that
It's
sketch
the
again.
last
so-
side right there, I think.
The
Yeah,
last
double-
one right here?
Yeah, I think you need to create a new line.
Can you double click on this sketch down here to edit it again? So it's the last one in the timeline. Hit it again. Double click.
I am double clicking, it's not doing it now.
That's kind of weird.
Left
Broke
click
it.
and then edit, I think also works.
You mean right clicking at it?
Yes. Other left.
How do I get back to the flat?
Yeah, right click wasn't doing it either.
Register back here. Back to it.
I enjoy this a lot.
Yeah, you know.
That's right.
Yeah,
above
how
the
do your
cube.
teeth?
So let's do.
How much can I close it before I can see it?
Ah, there we go.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, can you zoom in a little bit
Wire.
on
Please don't.
these two corners, like where the lines would normally reconnect? Because I think one of them is maybe not totally connected. Yeah, that one's not quite connected.
Oh, look at that.
Yep.
So can I just drag it over?
Yeah, do that.
And then click finish sketch?
It didn't shade it in. Right?
Doesn't appear to.
So does it open on the other side too?
Can you take a look at the other side as well?
My favorite catch.
How do I get over there?
So zoom back out.
There we go.
Or pan. That's very good. Okay, so yeah, it looks like something is not connected, right? So, you mind if I look over your shoulder?
No, not at all.
Okay. Come see your mouse. So, in a situation like this, it might be best just to redraw those lines.
Okay.
Okay? So what I'm gonna do is, we're just gonna walk this back.
It does exactly that. That is how you measure it, by the way. Maybe this water
Okay.
caliper.
Okay.
And so we're gonna start right here, we're gonna,
Can you measure this hole?
oh, I see what the problem is. We're not, since we're not in the same sketch as the rectangle, you did it in two different sketches here, which is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but that means that it's not snapping to the corners of the rectangle.
Got it.
Okay? So see how now it's snapping
Yep.
here? So if we come across by 5,
Yep.
here we see.
Is there a way, like, if I hadn't started this in the same sketch, I could like combine the two objects?
Right, so it was you.
Like add the lines
Like 2 layers, so-
sketched before?
You mean without redrawing it?
Yes.
Not that I'm aware of.
Alright.
Yeah, it's because
Yep,
you're not
if you
snapping
redraw
the
those
corner,
lines, I
so
think you'll be all
it
set.
would happen if it was exactly on the.
Wait, what are we doing?
I know, but
What are we talking about, Jack?
19 millimeters.
Why can't
Okay,
you?
so
I
is
did
there
one
anybody
sketch.
who's not kind of,
You did
I
one
know
sketch.
Marcus
One
is still
Yeah,
catching up.
Roland's doing, trying
How
to
you
do two
doing?
and
Doing
then
okay?
combining it.
Oh, you were
can't
okay.
quite get to the right corner.
Okay,
Eyeball.
so, Marcus
You
is
can
catching up.
limit it,
in a
you
minute.
can literally
Um,
measurement it.
So the next feature that we want to add is the bolt holes, right? The screw holes that are going to hold the servo to the part. And after that, we'll do the flanges. So start a new sketch on the top surface of this shape that you extruded, okay? And we're going to do something a little bit differently now. You know, before, like in the past, you know, we've created features that just sort of snap to something that's already in the drawing. But we got to create these holes in the middle of this space. There's a couple of different ways to do it, but we're getting into more advanced drawing operations now, and I want to show you a really precise way to do it. So let's draw the first circle.
Can I ask you, we need to know where along the site, it's not just this way, but when the thing fits in, how.
Yes, that's a good question. So Gordon's asking, how do we know where the holes are going to be located on this axis as well as this axis? And I guess it's sort of cheating for me to say that I know that they're symmetrical. Like I know that these holes are in the middle of the flange, and so they're going to be in the middle of this space. But we're going to locate those in a minute. You could measure them though.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Okay,
Hey, do
so,
you have a revised version of this?
Jack? Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go
But,
Yeah, you
can
wanna
you
trade?
draw a circle?
Draw a circle, sorry.
That's okay. So
Yes.
draw a circle.
Is it
Don't
a
worry
circle?
about where it is though,
Okay.
okay? Draw a circle, make it 2 millimeters in diameter. Okay?
Do you want a center diameter circle or?
Yeah, do a center diameter circle. Don't worry too much about placement, just make it 2 millimeters in diameter. And then do another one over on this side as well, okay? So you're gonna have 2 circles, they're gonna be roughly in the right place on the model, but not precisely located yet, okay? Great. Now, we know that those 2 holes are supposed to be, what, 27 millimeters apart, because we wrote it down before, okay? So we're gonna use the dimension tool. Go up to the create menu up here, and go down to the option that says sketch dimension. So the last one, the hotkey is D. Okay? Now click on the center of the circle, and then click on the center of the other circle, and then drag the mouse down. Southward, yeah, now click again. Okay, it gives you the option to set a dimension, type in what we're looking for, which is 27 millimeters. So that was, okay, so go ahead and draw a circle. Don't worry about exactly where it is, but make it 2 millimeters. Yep, we'll do another one over here. And then we're gonna set the distance between them using this dimension.
I don't like
D.
I don't like I
Okay.
don't like the center.
Click the 2 cent in the center of both.
Okay,
Yeah,
the
sorry.
middle one.
Here's the thing. I don't like
And then
this.
the middle of the other.
D first and then.
And then click to drop that
D,
dimension.
yeah, open the.
Now go down.
Yes.
Type in distance
They're not
now, which is 27 millimeters.
27.
So did everybody follow that? 2 circles, then you set the dimension to 27 millimeters. Did everybody get that?
Yes.
So now these are the same distance apart, right? But Jack, if you click on one of those circles, actually hit escape first to get rid of the dimension tool. If you click on one of those circles and kind of wiggle it around, you can move them, right? So they're moving together, they're fixed relative to each other horizontally, but there's nothing holding them in place. There's nothing saying where they're located in the model, right?
Oh god.
So we gotta take care of that. I know, what are we gonna do?
No, I just don't like how it moves in such a bizarre way. Like it moves at an angle. It feels like the worst control.
center point.
Ah.
Other land,
Okay.
other landly stuff.
Alright, so now.
Okay, wow, how did you even do that?
Wait,
Oh,
why
if
is
you
yours
grab
doing
one
that?
of the circles,
It goes up and
does-
down.
Oh, wait, no, that's both.
Oh, yeah, two sketches.
Wait, bro, look at mine.
Okay,
Look
can
at
you
mine.
undo what you did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm good now.
Jack, just don't mind that.
Yeah,
Look at
excellent.
this.
Got it.
So draw 2 circles,
2 circles.
one over that arm and one over that arm.
Okay.
Make them 2 millimeters in diameter. Okay. Okay, so let's do something else to locate these in space, okay? First thing I want you to do, Jack, is set another dimension. So go back to the dimension tool. okay? And click on the center of that circle, okay? And then click on the back line here, so this line here. The one that I'm, yeah, there you go. So click on that, and then drag over this way. Alright, we're gonna set another dimension. So the mounting holes are halfway
Okay, so I've got my 2 circles.
back on this arm, okay? So we made this arm 12.5 millimeters thick. So what's half of that? What's half of 12.5?
6.25.
Yep. So Jack, can you set that dimension to 6.25?
So I've got my 2 circles, Jeff.
Yeah. Set a dimension between the center of this one to the center of this one.
Okay, so I go, is it create?
Yep, create, at the bottom is sketch dimension.
Do I need to be sketch dimension?
Yep, you're good. Click on the center of one and then the center of the other. And then drag down and click again. Yep.
Doesn't matter how far?
And wherever you want to put the label, it's just a decorative thing.
Okay.
And set that dimension to 27.
Do you have to do this for both holes?
You mean, oh, great question. So Gordon just asked if you need to set a dimension for both circles, right? And the answer is no, okay? Because if we set a dimension between these 2 circles, and then we locate this circle relative to this line, and then we're also gonna do one more dimension that's gonna locate it this way, they're all gonna be locked together. You're gonna see that in a second. So Jack, if you hit escape again to get rid of the dimension tool, and you click and drag that circle again, does it still move?
Yes,
Which way?
only on one.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah. So that means we're unconstrained on one dimension. Okay. So we're gonna fix that. Okay. So let's locate that circle halfway across this this arm here. So set another dimension. Right. Click on the center of the circle. Now you could set the dimension between this side of the arm or this side of the arm. My personal preference is to set it to the right side of the arm. Any idea why? This might be kind of
More
deep.
precise to the part, perhaps?
Yes, exactly. So imagine for a minute that you draw this part, right? And if you set the dimension from this circle to this edge 2.5 millimeters, or from the center of this circle to this edge 2.5 millimeters, both are correct for this part. But if you go back later on and you decide, you know, this part is too wimpy, I really need to make it 7 millimeters wide, you make it wider, that hole is going to be in the wrong location now. Because it's going to be relative to that edge, which may change when you expand the part outward. We're going to see a better example of that later. But for now, set that dimension to the inside edge and make it 2.5 millimeters. You okay? Yeah, doing great. Yeah.
So I'm gonna go create, set dimension.
You're good right now. You have everything.
We might have to-
27 or 28?
we might have to click.
You goofed something way back.
What's this dimension?
27.
So I click on the center of that circle.
Something. Maybe it's 20.
And
What?
That's right.
that right edge.
Okay, it looks like there's some dimension there at the top somewhere, but that's
Yeah, I'm
a
gonna back up a little.
Yeah.
I can't get mine to move.
What's that?
What was the size? 2.5?
Yeah, 2.5 millimeters. Okay, so Jack, I bet you can't move those circles in.
Oh wait, this
No, I
one's
cannot.
closer to the edge than this one. It's 28.
Wait, no,
The
it's
bottom
not.
one is 28.
Hey Jack,
Yes.
once you hit the middle of that first circle,
Yes.
do you then
What are you
hit
talking
the
about?
right edge?
Yeah.
That freaking monitor.
The right.
So you hit the middle of the circle, then the right edge.
Yeah, or it could be the left edge.
Yeah, one of mine is closer.
Because you're just centering it, so it's
One of mine is
spaced off the
closer.
sides.
Mine are perfectly balanced.
Yeah, I just set mine to 28.
How do I change it? Mine
Just
is
click on it, double click.
But mine's perfectly
Double click.
27. Okay.
I need my dad's using my
This
PC.
dimension, which is 23,
It's like that's not.
No, you don't.
That's the least I want.
It's supposed to be 27.
But 28 works for me for some reason. I'll have 28 is working for me.
Mine's really weird dimension.
If I do 27, it's not both
I'm
aren't centered.
still-
One of
He
them
said
Oh,
28.
this is.
Well, not.
I was using 27 and it was looking weird too.
Nice.
By weird, I
See?
mean-
Oh.
Together.
Mine looks fine with 27.
Advocating for
These are
28.
not horizontally.
28.
28 is good.
I think
Drew
I'm
is
missing
wrong.
something because mine are still moving.
Drew is objectively wrong.
Yeah, we'll fix that. Hey, so,
You can set distance, yeah.
What's that?
Like 2.5.
Yeah, it's funny, I knew. Yeah, I didn't, when I was drawing this, I didn't come up with that.
Which one?
So, hey guys, interesting problem.
Center?
So in his model, his circles are not, on the same,
This circle?
horizontal line.
Yeah, I'm not either.
They're like that. And, that's interesting because that never happened to me when I was drawing this part. So we're skipping ahead here a little bit, but I think there's a really easy way to fix that. So let's see. Gordon, can you cast up here for a second? It's important that we, that when these interesting problems arise, we work through them together.
We celebrate the differences.
So to get it centered.
Yes.
So from this side, right? So I clicked on this.
Yep.
And then I clicked on that edge.
Yeah.
And then I brought it up a little bit to mark it.
John
25.
negative.
Then I clicked on this. And I brought it up here.
I'm
Just
sorry.
clicked on that, brought it down a little bit, set it at 6.25.
So let me show you. Watch this. Watch this.
Because now they're.
He's gonna open all the way to 0.
Okay.
Yeah,
I feel like I missed something.
Excellent.
I don't know if I
think he said
Okay,
I
so
did it
can you
with
zoom in a little bit?
the left.
So everybody take a look at Gordon's
Yes,
screen here.
because it's always gonna
So
have
see
to
how
hold
these
that.
two circles are not on the same horizontal line?
The same both
This is
sides.
interesting because they are spaced this way correctly, and they're spaced from the back edge of the bracket correctly, but they're not in the same line. So when drawing this, you can avoid that problem. After you draw the first circle, you can kind of drag your mouse across to draw the second one. It'll give you a dotted line to indicate that. And I'll bet you anything I just did that out of habit, and so I just didn't come across this problem. So let's try setting what's called a constraint. We're going to talk about this later anyway. So hit escape to get rid of the dimension tool, so you don't have any tools selected. Go up to the constraints menu here. Now constraints set relationships between two objects in your sketch. Choose the one that says horizontal/vertical, okay? And then click on this circle, the center of this circle first, and then go and click on the center of the other circle. It didn't seem to do anything.
Yeah, that's what I felt too. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
So
Okay.
the first click must not have been in.
Sure.
Wait,
So,
that only works.
okay, so let's just talk for like 3 seconds about dimensions and constraints. You look like you have a puzzled look on your face.
Is it whichever one you click to, the second one will snap to?
Typically, yes.
Well then, how did
He,
that?
no, he clicked the,
I
he missed
failed
the
to
first
click.
one.
I think I missed the first click.
It was a misclick.
I went to the second click, nothing happened, I went back to
Oh,
the
okay.
first click.
Okay, so we've been using dimensions
the
to
Mr.
set,
Pro.
the distance between two objects, like move this edge so far from this edge, move this circle so far from that other feature of the drawing. So dimensions are fixed, they set distances between objects, okay? Constraints set relationships between objects. You can go through the constraints menu a little bit later, but basically you can set things to be horizontal with respect to each other or vertical. You can set a line tangent to a circle. You can set lines perpendicular to each other. You can set one object at the midpoint of a line. All of these things are relationships between parts of a sketch and other parts of a sketch. Okay? And these are super useful when you're setting things up together because a lot of times in a sketch, for example, if you need a line to stay perpendicular to another line, if you go and move that line, you don't want the line to stay behind, right? You want to preserve that relationship and have the thing move together. So constraints are how you do that. We're going to do more with that later, but that's just a really good example. So are you able to fix that as well? So in your case, if you go up to the constraints thing here, choose horizontal. Oh, oh, it is. Sorry, it was just because I'm standing up. Sorry.
What is it? If I'm having a
What is
challenge
it?
getting
Are you pressing over on the
from the
middle?
center to that edge, that two.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
So it's not set 47, right? It's not 7.
Yep.
Yeah, but that's not
Doing
in
my
line.
sketch dimension.
But in here,
Yep.
it'd be like
Center
minus 20.
Yep.
seems to be a problem.
Okay. Yep. And then drag the mouse down.
I have a Taurus mouse. No, I have like that mouse where you put your hand in and you just like
Click one more time.
fingers and
And then you can type. Yep. Brilliant.
7. So close. I don't know, Jack.
Okay, so when you're at this point, go ahead and hit finish sketch. And then you might want to go back to 3D mode just for the sake of clarity. You can click on the, yeah, there you go.
My holes don't look there.
So is Gordon on that one with the?
Yeah, he's on the right.
Yep.
That's what's going on with mine.
Which is
And then
what?
I tried to put a dimension in, and it said I was over constraining. It was like I was stretching.
I think that means it already it's already like locked
well,
in every.
I can
Because
help
I've
you.
got 28 here, and so it can't be more than 2.5 this way because it would go over
Yeah.
28. So it's like there's some friction there. So I'm not sure what my math went wrong.
Okay, so
It's just
at what
constraining.
point did it say that you were over constraining the sketch?
I was trying to. I didn't.
A while ago.
Mine. No, it's like the last thing I did. Mine looked like Gordon's, where it was like it just looks a little too close to the center on one side, and so I tried to measure it or try to put that 2.5 in because it should be halfway,
Yeah.
and then the 2.5 wouldn't fit. Basically.
Okay, so can you go back into the sketch there, Gordon?
Down this one?
Yep, the last one in the timeline. Yep.
Here.
Double click that.
More though, it's a bigger empty.
Yeah, can you delete, so click on the line that represents the 27 millimeter.
That guy.
Yep,
Delete it?
Yep.
I just accidentally do it.
there you go.
All right, I just did it.
Don't do it.
Now, set a new dimension between the two circles.
Oh, I just double tapped on the 27.
It is back around
Comes
now.
up with the distance between them.
Yep, drag that down and hit enter.
I'll be
So
back
maybe I
to
messed
that.
up my original dimensions perhaps.
Let's see.
Oh,
Did
our
you
entire
put
table
in
has
27?
I have one with 28.
Did we do our math wrong somewhere?
So yeah, we got 27s and 28s floating all
28 is
around back
correct,
here.
28 is,
Correct. You said 28. I'm quoting you as saying 28 between the two.
28 works.
Mine turned out.
I think that's what I did, was 28.
28 works. We'll find out if it's right.
So let's see.
There's a big difference.
The width
looks
of this
better.
pocket right here, so the space inside should be 23 across. The way you check that is make sure you don't have a tool selected, so hit escape or something. And then click on this line right here. It'll give you a dimension
Oh,
right
that's
here.
what I
So
did.
that's 23, so that's correct. That tracks with our
Where did
diagram
you-
here.
oh,
This
yeah.
does in
Yep.
fact say on this model that it's 27 in between
Okay.
the two.
So
So something's screwy.
the distance
I'm not
between
changing my model.
the holes should be 27 millimeter, right?
Mhm.
23 on the inside.
Maybe we made it thicker than you did last time.
Yeah, I think
whatever.
so. I think we
It's-
made it a
Yeah,
thinner.
I made 5 millimeters is the thickness of my thighs, right?
Yep.
I think you made it how big is this chunk?
I'm doing it, no, it's 28, Jack.
Oh my, I
Yeah,
know.
it's also
That's
five.
Yeah, I think I made a math error somewhere.
Probably
So-
the guy that helped measure.
Guys,
it.
from one from the inside of one.
Yeah, I just did
I
the
don't
thing.
think
It's
so.
20
Didn't we round a bunch
It's
of things?
20 with the thing.
What's that?
No, that doesn't matter. We're not trying to put the piece in.
So this
No,
is
but dude, from the
23.
end of, wait, from
And we
from
want-
the inside of one circle to the outside of the other.
That's what I just did.
Jack, from the inside of one
23
circle,
plus 10 is
it's
33,
28.
so that's
we're
opposite
right.
should be 30.
We are right,
Yeah,
it is
that's
20,
right.
it is 28.
Simultaneous.
These are
How come I can't measure this one?
Which one?
The interior.
Better what?
When I click on that one, it just says.
Oh, no, you gotta just move it a tiny bit, cause that's 23.
Yeah, guys, I really think the problem is I can't do math, I just can't see where my error is.
It's 28. Because I just measured the one you printed, it's 28.
Whoever measured it
That's what I
the
said.
model.
It was wrong, but you measured
That was
that.
you.
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
I think it was lost in translation, Jeff wrote it
The
down.
nearsighted thing is a problem, so you don't want me in the hole looking.
It is totally fine.
Is that 28?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so,
Can I double click into this?
thank you everybody for being patient while we spent 15 minutes to figure out
It's important.
that Jeff can't do math.
So I can double click that line.
Yes, you can. So to change that dimension, double click the 27, type in a 28, should snap over. Is everybody more or less looking previously?
I did servo.
Yeah? Okay. Thank you for being so patient. Okay, so go ahead and finish your sketch, and then, let's extrude those holes down, or extrude those circles down to make the holes in the model.
How far
Yeah.
down?
The whole
That's an excellent question. If we wanted, we could measure the screws, which there's a bag of them somewhere, but I will tell you that they're about 7 millimeters long. Yep. You can measure them if you want, but 7 should be more than sufficient.
But I probably should have a
Uh,
meter sign there, is that?
Yes.
Make sure you
with
select
going
both
down?
too,
Yes,
otherwise.
otherwise you will end up with a post coming up out of your burn.
Also, don't, also make sure you select both, because
Excellent
otherwise
point.
the
Oh,
circles
shoot.
disappear.
Yeah,
thank
you.
See, this is collaboration.
A little quicker on that one.
That was the
It works so
hardest
hard.
thing,
Wait,
because I sketched a bunch of little things into this thing I was making,
Yeah.
and then I selected one part and
Yep,
all
and
the
all of them
lines
disappeared.
disappeared.
So that's actually supposed to be a helpful feature in Fusion, because a lot of times when you do an operation like that, you want to get the sketch out of the way so it's not cluttering up the diagram, and they do that. You can actually override that if you need to. If you do something like that and you want to get the sketch back, it's up in here. If you expand your component, there's a folder called Sketches. If you click on Expand Sketches, and then when they're used up, there's a little eyeball gets grayed
Yeah,
out.
and you can
So
see a little
yeah,
thing.
you can bring it back that way.
So this prints like really perfectly to fit this servo.
Yeah.
And this hole isn't supposed to go
What can I
through.
see?
And those,
It's supposed to go
like,
inside.
the stream isn't perfectly
7 millimeters.
tiny point, so how does it print so
The part,
perfectly?
So that's a combination of it being a very accurate printer, and then the software used to prepare the model it translates from the 3D model, and it knows where exactly to locate the nozzle, so that the plastic doesn't go to
Like the
either side
nozzle's
of
not
the
like right on the edge, it like goes a little bit
Yeah.
in so that
Yeah,
it's
there's a lot of fine tuning that went into that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can I
so,
just- Jordan, can you measure
uh,
this boy
let's go to the
That's
next
another
part of the
goal.
model.
From
So
what
let's
to
just kinda
stop?
keep this moving
No,
along
just
here.
a little bit.
How big the
Let's add these flanges.
And how far it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
so,
about
do a new
3
sketch
millimeters.
on either the base plane, like the XY plane, or you can click on the bottom of your model if you like that better. But you wanna get back into a 2D sketch, looking down on the model.
So we're back on top.
Yep. Who's over here?
The model.
Is that Jack?
Yes.
Awesome.
It doesn't check the flimsy board.
Come on, the
You
bottom.
mean to
Take that
sketch?
model.
Down here.
Yeah, where's
Yeah, you want to
looks
be
so-
done.
It's about 10
Okay,
millimeters.
so yeah, how big do we wanna make that flange?
It's
So wait,
seven,
do we click on the top or the bottom?
it's 7 on that.
Yep, so I drew
Out,
it,
7 out.
so, when I made my model, I was sizing it for 3mm bolt. So I made it 7 millimeters to give me a little bit of room on either side. But, you know, again, when you're designing your own part, you can kind of make it whatever size you want. I just didn't want the area around the bolts to be really flimsy and break
You
easily.
put it on the bottom.
So go ahead and draw a rectangle around this edge. Make sure you snap on Jack did a great job. You snap on this top corner, you snap on this bottom corner, okay? Now, you might be tempted to go draw the same flange on the other side, but I'm gonna show you something else to do for that. Why don't you go ahead and add a couple of circles in here for the bolt holes?
No, I'm supposed to hit create sketch, right?
Yeah.
How big are the circles? 3, right?
Create
They're
sketch.
3.
That's 2 points.
Whoops. Yeah,
That one.
yeah, go ahead and click on that, and then you'll be on that page one. What's up?
You said what, 7? So, we're gonna throw a
Okay,
couple of circles.
try to double click.
here.
What's the distance between these two?
Fail to solve. Please delete or, okay, well, what you can do is you can click on the 27 and hit delete instead.
Always
No, I
good when
mean,
you want to send to
don't
the
click
picture,
on edit and
just
just click on it to
that
select it.
hash mark.
So in this case.
No, that's no.
Click on the 27 one.
Oh wait, no, that's
Yeah,
not
just try
good.
to-
I'm sorry, that's what I meant.
Oh, you have two 27s, that's right.
Happens every
So-
time.
Is that close?
They might let you know that.
How big are you making your circles?
I'm making a rectangle.
Okay, so,
Guys, how big you
who was
make your
measuring
circles?
here? We got 3mm holes.
Okay.
Yes.
How far apart are they?
I do not know.
Would you like me to do that?
Yeah, I measured it, but I'm getting an inaccurate measurement because I'm bad at measuring.
Well, you know how we get better?
Do
Practice.
You use the text boxes and do it exact.
Yeah, or you ask your neighbor.
What
Why is
the
my
distance?
rectangle not snapping too?
So we
This
need
is
2,
zeroed.
3.
This is not zeroed.
Yep, two
Snap
3mm
two corners.
holes.
They're about.
Rogue, you're going on the bottom.
No, it's
Just
not.
run to the
Yeah,
nearest
I went to the bottom.
Nine
That's where the
millimeters
things
apart.
are.
Okay, that works.
I'm trying to make 7 millimeter rectangles.
It's not snapping? Okay, so let's undo and let's.
Or you want a 2-point rectangle?
Yeah.
Okay.
Undo back out and we'll start the sketch again. Okay,
The
so,
copies are small.
can you go back to your 3D view? Click on the little hole in
How
there.
far are we putting holes apart?
Now do create sketch. And then click on that base plane button, so we can.
It's like Mr. Kelly.
Like it's kind of
It's
hidden
like
inside
this
it.
tiny head. By the
So
way,
this is to the hole in the edge.
Nope.
we'll find that out. Oh, you want me to go now?
Yeah.
The distance.
In the middle of the hole in the edge.
I can't
Told
count.
you? That's the easiest one.
I can give you the edge of the
Alright,
hole.
so create a sketch.
I can give you yeah, they're probably centered on.
Yeah, but it seemed like it was,
Diameter
like, it was
is
behaving
three,
weird
so
because you
it's
were
1.5
sketching upside down.
plus whatever
So
you
look
get.
down from the top.
From the edge to
Okay,
the
that's
edge.
just how
And,
far.
like all, spin all the way
What's
down.
that
There you
number?
go. Now, do you create a new sketch?
2.5.
2.5 plus 1.
Plus 1.5 is
There
3.
you go.
2.5 plus 1.
So now when you try a rectangle,
No,
it's gonna
four.
sketch.
So I'm drawing it from the top, but it's drawn on the bottom because I can.
It's actually drawing on the base plane, and I think it might be
Oh, it's already
considering
formed,
when you're,
sketch,
if you're
epic.
drawing inverted like that, it's not, you're not really drawing on that, on the surface that already
Please come up
exists.
with a different number.
So, we really wanted to snap to those corners, so.
Yeah.
Alright, so how far apart are those circles?
9.
Okay, so they're 9 millimeters apart and they're 3 millimeters in diameter, right? And then can you center them on that flange?
They are.
Nice job.
So to make them 9 millimeters apart, we want to set
A dimension.
Dimension?
Yep.
And they're
So-
and the center is 4 millimeters in
Sketch
diameter.
dimension.
Yeah, so Jack's killing it here. We got two 3 millimeter circles. He dimensioned them so that they are
And
9
Jack,
millimeters
on
apart.
top and bottom.
Um,
2.5.
how
it's
did you
also 4.
determine, oh, because they're,
It's the same.
if they're 9 millimeters apart and this whole thing is, how big? How did you center them
there we
this
go.
way?
Well, we did 9. We figured out how, did the little trick with the thing, the circles.
Yep.
And found that it was 9 in between. And then for the edge, we measured from the, since we're drawing point circles from the center,
Yep.
we did from the edge of the circle to the edge from, I can actually do it from here
Mhm.
to here,
Yep.
right there, 2.5, and then
Yep.
we added the amount that's from here to there, to the
Okay,
1.5
yep.
plus 2.5 equals 4, and then just mapped it as 4.
Everybody follow that?
So we're setting a dimension to what?
Huh?
9 millimeters apart.
Yep.
4 millimeters from the bottom edge. And then, 3.5 this way because that's half the width of the rectangle. So they're centered that way.
I use the different approach.
That's totally fine.
I copy what they have.
Okay. That's, oh, yeah, right, nice.
That was my approach as well.
Yeah, it worked.
Okay,
You said
so.
3.5 from the center diameter down to the center of the circle down to the bottom?
3.5 from the center of the circle to the right of the.
Oh, we're going 4 now, never mind, I can see it.
Yeah, 3.5 this way, 4 that way.
So there's that one, and then 3.5, that
So
one.
3.5 from the center to this edge, 4 from the center to
Eating
this edge.
dimensions all willy-nilly.
Yeah, it's a little hard to read them, so like, if you do this a lot, you'll get in the habit of pulling the dimensions out so that, you know, they're sort of all organized and you can see them and stuff. Okay, so, what we're gonna do now is you've created this flange on the left, right? And I know Jack will be back in a minute. We could just redraw it over here, but we can also mirror it over here. I don't know, have we mirrored before?
No.
You mentioned it, but we didn't.
Okay, so Jack, this isn't a big time saver because that was pretty easy to do, but we're gonna just go through the experience of mirroring something, okay? So what I want you to do is go to the line tool. Yeah? And now draw a line. Do you remember how to find the midpoint?
It's a little dot thingy on the
Yeah,
edge.
when you drag across, it should tell you where that midpoint is.
Is it triangle?
Yeah, try down here.
Where? Here?
Okay. Look at the screen.
Sorry, where are you trying to?
That's okay. Hit escape and select the line first. Go ahead and select that line. Yep. Now go to the line tool. Oh, that's peculiar.
It is.
Mine doesn't
even snap to it.
Above it or below it.
Okay.
It seems to be like this.
Alright, so let me show you how to work around that.
You
Okay.
just do 23 and then divide.
Well, yeah, but
See,
again.
I did a center point, like I did a center point
Mine isn't
rectangle,
snapping
so mine
to
is
the-
like
to the
literally the
other
center.
Okay, so Jack, draw
So what do I do?
a vertical line,
Don't try.
right? Draw a vertical line, don't worry about getting in the middle.
Okay.
Okay? Great. Okay. Now hit escape. Now, see this sketch palette over here? Can you expand that? Okay. Now click on that line you just drew. Well, I guess it's already selected. There you go. See this option here that says construction? Click on that. Yeah.
Yeah, an interesting topic.
Okay. I'll come and take a look. So go ahead and click on construction. See how that makes it the dotted line?
Mm-hmm.
That means you can use it to refer to things, but it won't get in the way of things like extruding and all of that kind of stuff.
And you
Okay?
can still move it around.
Yeah, so click on that line to select it. Is anything on fire or are you okay? Okay, just give me one more second. So click on the line to select it. Okay, now go up to constraints. And there's a constraint option in the menu for midpoint. Yeah, and now click on that right there.
Aha. Ooh.
So that snapped it to the midpoint of that line. So that's a more flexible way to do it because if you ever resize this part, that line will stay in the midpoint. Okay? Now Jack, I'm gonna try to figure this out on your own. Select the parts that you drew for the flange on the left, and then use the mirror tool to copy it to the other side. See if you can figure that out.
Where's the mirror tool?
No, it is not.
No, mirrors tools in the create menu.
What was the thing he just walked you
that
through there for a
probably means
second?
the dimension
It
is
didn't do nothing.
attached to something not
It's not important.
So can you, let's undo that. Okay. Now delete that dimension. So
Thank
just
you,
click on
guys.
the-
What was the thing he just like?
Oh, constraints? About constraints?
Mike,
Oh, so first you need to make this a construction.
So can you zoom
By
in?
going
There's a
here,
lot going
and
on
you can
inside
get dotted
the
line.
I'm not sure.
We selected this. We did the dotted line
Okay, so
through
zoom back
construction.
in.
Now it's not gonna
It could
interfere
be
with
that
the
when
drawing
you
board.
the
Now you need
rectangle
to
didn't
select
snap
all that's
to
over
the-
here.
to the
Yeah,
bottom.
I'm working on boop.
So, let's
Bop.
make sure
Beep.
that's the case.
Bop.
Can you click on the rectangle?
Boop.
What is the construction there?
So that just.
So the sketch palette and the line
So when you
tool.
click on a line and you go to.
That did absolutely nothing for my
Sketch
sketch.
panel,
Right.
there's a little button.
Gotcha.
Literally nothing changed when I hit mirrors.
Now, there probably needs
Bring
to
out the
be-
mirror tab on the right.
Yes, yes.
Alright,
Do you
so
select the
I got
midpoint
all
as
my
the
stuff
mirror
selected.
tab boy
So-
thing?
Yeah,
Mirror.
and then I hit right here.
No. Here's your problem. Alright, so press cancel. So select that with the select tool. Select all that.
I'm only mirroring this part.
I know, but you're not selecting the lines. I think you're selecting the weird stuff. So just use the select tool. Just select everything. Oh,
Hey, Jack.
Yes.
Looks like you figured that out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so did everybody see what Jack did there?
And then go mirror line.
Tell me if I'm right, Jack.
Where?
That one right there.
Did you
Just click
select
that,
the
and then click
circles
that.
in the square and then mirror across this line? Is that what happened?
You're missing one
I
line.
guess.
Yeah.
Rectangle.
Okay.
And I think you might miss
Did you
a
draw-
line. You're missing a line on the other side as well.
Did you draw the rectangle using the rectangle tool, or did you draw both sides? Okay, so you don't normally have to select all four sides, but if you ever get in a situation like that, you can double click on one of the sides of the rectangle and it selects all. So Jack, that looks great.
Thank you.
Was everybody able to mirror the features like that? Anybody
No.
stuck?
Yo, look at this.
Yeah? Okay, so you got your mirror line and you got your parts there. So, and you go to, here. So select the circles first.
Damn line. Right, I click
No.
in the middle.
Rather than clicking and dragging like that, just click on them.
So,
Select
mirror.
midpoint
Can I
line.
flip?
Your midpoint is right there.
Pause the mirror.
You're still in the right tool.
Right.
Hit mirror line.
Yeah, I know what I mean.
Collect the
So,
construction
yes,
line.
you got all these things selected.
You said it was
Go to
up
mirror
5
line,
You
through.
didn't create a midpoint line, did
and then
you?
click.
And I just started.
This dotted line. Trying to fix the fucking thing this whole time.
That was
The
great.
dotted line.
What was that?
So you-
Okay, create a
so
line.
you're-
Okay,
so
wow.
Create line.
Yep.
So
Now
guys,
your midpoint
using
is
that mirror
triangle.
tool,
Yep.
in this case, it's probably not like it saved you hours of work.
Just create a line.
But can you see how if you were doing a really complicated part that was symmetrical, that would be a big time saver?
So I sketched the line. This is a sketch.
Boom.
Yeah, okay.
And you are in the construction mode.
So I make that the construction.
How far
So
are we
then-
construct? Are we bringing it 3?
3. Yeah.
I didn't select everything, because I've got 2 circles and
so
then it's
now
on mine.
click on that. Okay, now look, the stuff. Click on it.
So could I do
Bring up the
this?
sketch palette and hit.
I do
That's
this.
okay.
Doesn't love it yet. And now click on constraints.
The selected option.
Midpoint. Now click on this line.
That looks okay.
And now.
You guys, this one of those deals where you can hold down tab to
Select all
select
Like, I
one
wonder
of
if
them.
it's just not rendering it properly?
How big is this? Jordan, how did
Oh, I know. Okay, so,
No, mirror at all.
you're back in the sketch now?
This line.
I bet you it didn't mirror the last line of the rectangle.
And
So,
it didn't do it correctly, but you
can
know the rest of the.
yeah, can you undo and we'll mirror
You
it?
didn't
one more
select,
time?
it didn't select the rest of the line.
So, yeah, so choose mirror. Now double click on one of the lines on the rectangle. Yep, and now select the circle. And, yeah,
Jack, how tall is this thing?
there you go.
This is 5.
Okay, so,
It's
Jack, how
17.5
thick did you
tall, I
make
think.
your
Oh, no, that's
flanges?
three tall.
3.
Okay, so, if you guys have your mirrored flanges, go ahead and extrude those up to 3 millimeters. Does
Yeah,
anybody
do you mind wandering
start?
back for a sec? Yeah, I mirrored my 2 circles and my outside line,
Yeah,
but not the rest of my rectangle.
okay. Do you wanna put it up on the screen or? what do you
Yeah,
wanna do?
doesn't matter.
I have my mirror line selected, but I can't select down.
Does that actually?
You can take my screen. I don't think I'm really.
Alright, screen it. What do you guys want?
Looks like an optimus or a line.
Looks like about to say.
Yeah. So then click on
It'll join the
that
shapes if the
object
line
window and
is
select the
so.
other things. So double click on this
No,
line
don't
on
include
the,
the circles.
on the side of the rectangle and select it, no, double click it. There you go, get the whole rectangle and then select the
It's not
2
four
circles.
close.
Yeah,
And then
because
we
it's
select the
close.
circles.
So if I go back then,
Yeah.
Got
and
it.
then hit it.
Got it.
so I just got rid of what I did. So this is what I did, right? I had just those 2 circles and
Yep.
that. So if I undo that,
Undo until they disappear.
there we go.
Yep.
So now,
Yep,
do I just click?
so select the mirror tool first.
I need this.
Yep, now double click on one of those lines, and you'll select the whole rectangle.
Okay.
Now select the circles.
Double click again?
Yeah, just single. Like double click is when like you have something that's made up of multiple pieces, like a
Okay, so now
rectangle.
I've got
slow
4
acting
sides, 2 circles, so
Yep.
6 things.
And then the mirror line.
Except,
you gotta select
except
the
this
mirror
part
line,
only
tell it
moves
to your-
relatively forward.
And then select the line.
It moves relatively
Okay,
forward.
so you're saying what do you wanna mirror and how do you wanna mirror it?
Extendable
And then-
fan.
And then we're extruding what, 3 millimeters?
Yeah.
Or
Do I extrude all the way down and then extrude down from the top negatively? Would that work?
Is your part upside down, or did you do the sketch?
No, I wanted to do it upside
Okay, so
down. I wanted to do it from the bottom, but I ended up doing it from the top.
Okay,
So it's attached to the top right now, right?
okay, well, so then your mounting holes are gonna be on the wrong side?
Right.
Okay, do you wanna throw it up on the screen or show you how to fix that?
Yeah.
It's an interesting problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm having the same exact problem. I did the same thing. You put it on.
Right up there,
Nice.
second
Wow.
one.
I like, when I drew my sketch, I hit the very top of the thing.
Okay.
So where the screw holes are.
I'm opening up.
Like the
now.
most. I hate that part.
Is it possible for you to mirror it on the line? Yeah, but I'm not gonna do that. Nice.
Ah.
I guess you could.
I
mirror
need
it
that,
on
I
the
need
line.
that, I need that for something.
So we're waiting on somebody to come up on the monitor here?
They could put it
So wait a minute.
on the bottom if they can mirror it on the y-axis, they can just mirror it down.
You can,
More
there's
left or
actually
right?
an easier way to do it. So here's the thing about Fusion. If there's anything you could possibly screw up, right, they'd probably put a fix in for it, right? You can recover from almost anything that you can do.
Control Z.
Alright.
Is the best. Oh, look, everyone's doing the browser thing again.
Yeah.
So as I go sources from the desktop?
Yep, exactly. And and then I probably want you to select the desktop and share.
Come on, I want the right thing.
You guys can do this. I believe in you.
So is this what it should look like?
Is this you?
That's me on the right.
So
Wait, how?
it looks like actually you guys did the same thing, which is you both ended up with the flange sketch on the top surface rather than the bottom surface. Okay?
Well, aren't we
So,
at the cool table?
can I show you how to fix that?
Yeah.
So basically, we haven't really learned about construction planes yet, that's sort of next lesson, but your sketch is on the wrong plane.
Right.
Okay?
I
So
did that
this is
last
how-
week too.
This is how you fix that, okay? First thing I want you to do is, see up here where it says origin? That's, whoa,
How
Why
deep
did
is
I
it,
go
Jack?
away?
Up there.
Jack, how deep is it?
What? 10 and
The little chunk.
2.5 thick.
Why did I go away?
Jordan, I have one question for you though. Jordan, I got a question. You want to spray cranberry?
It kicked me off.
Yeah, but the left computer is really weird. It keeps breaking.
the screen, you mean?
Yeah, it
You
took
what?
it
You
took
had
me
a really
like.
long stretch where
What are
you
you
were
trying to
good.
measure?
No, I know, but the first round, it took me like.
Alright,
I mean,
yeah,
I
that
it
sounds
take me like
selected.
4 times. to
Just a
connect
little
once.
lip.
Yeah, just use one
I'm
of them.
afraid to tell you either. Oh, oh.
That's why. Take a lot.
Who's over there?
Or
I
you do
am.
that,
Okay.
and then subtract this and
I
that.
am,
What are you
but
trying
it's
to
not,
measure?
it's not taking my desktop.
So, check sources, go to desktop.
Bro, you don't even got these 3D
And then
rendering
click on the
machines.
screen.
Bro, you don't got these
Screen
epic
wrap.
Let me
shaders, bro.
see. I have to
And
see.
then click
You're
on
right, I
desktop.
don't.
I got the shaders, bro.
Well, we did the same thing, we'll let you know there.
Opposite order.
I did like,
Okay,
it's like
so can you
4
pop
from the
Fusion up
bottom,
here?
and it's 3
Yep.
high. It's, Jack said 2.5, I said 3.
Well, we almost got
It's
there.
2.5, that's what I
I know,
measured.
it keeps me as soon as
Well,
I
I
hit
did
two.
3, Jack.
It doesn't matter.
I like a little tolerance for my
No.
cables.
Alright. Cast.
Yep, change the source.
Sources.
Desktop.
Desktop.
You can
Where
tell
is
me
it?
Screen
you're
right.
gonna extrude it anyway, so
And
in a way
then
it
hit
doesn't
your
matter.
desktop there, and then hit
You can have
share.
the or.
Okay, cool. We'll go ahead and put
Looks
it.
like
five,
over
yeah.
there.
No, it keeps dropping. Wow, I don't know what is going on there. It's kinda hard to share stuff. Wait, did somebody, who's that?
Jack, I think, was that you?
That was me. My computers just won't stop connecting to one of them.
Okay.
It's just.
Jack, I can
I
try,
can
I
click
have the same
stop,
problem.
but
Can
if
you quit out of Chrome for a second?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Everyone left.
There it
Let's
is.
try it one more time. I wonder if maybe the problem we're having is it, like,
It's extruding.
Yeah, I'll get ready for him too. Come on, let's start this out.
Screen right?
You seem to extrude it the wrong way.
I'm not, if I extrude the other way,
It looks
it's
like I'm
gonna
there.
hit
Alright.
his
I'm gonna
face,
sneak.
so.
Nope.
No.
Even move my mouse a little
Bro,
bit.
check out
If
If
I
I
touch
extrude
my
this
mouse.
way, this line disappears.
That was
Now,
weird.
That line doesn't need to be there.
Okay.
It does if I wanna drag it down.
I'll try and see if we can.
Regardless.
I think we made the same
Will,
mistake,
that's
so
what we're gonna do.
I'll throw mine up there.
Yep.
This is where the screw is, it needs to be down here.
Okay.
Right there.
Click on screen left one more time. And then hit your
Oh,
desktop.
you selected the top face.
I know, when I made the sketch.
You
Sketch.
well, you
Okay.
just flip it upside down.
So Marcus,
Yep.
You can extrude it twice.
Is this what yours looks like, bro?
Hey, you
No,
go all the
I
way
had
down,
extruded
you can go
all the way
down,
down,
and then
then
extrude
extrude the
top
top
down.
a little bit.
Oh, yeah, that's.
That's like the most complicated way, but like.
What? No,
You guys
it's
trying to go
really
left?
easy.
I thought-
That's
Sorry.
too
I
extreme.
thought you were up on
I
my.
do have a question though.
I'm gone.
Let's break
Gordon, I just got there!
Put the line up here so when you're ready to do wire.
Oh, bro. Ever so slowly
Close, boom. Wow.
toward
Okay.
my
We
fusion.
hop back on here?
I will.
Where is DK?
Hey, I'm up.
Great. Okay. So, your sketch is on the wrong plane, so let's fix that. Can you expand right here where it says
Wait, where's
origin?
DK?
Where's his origin?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just found it.
What we're gonna do is we're gonna move your sketch, which is up here, down to the
Insert
plane that's down
decal.
here, okay?
Okay.
So,
It's under
right
cursor.
click on this sketch, the sketch in your timeline, the last one is the last one you did.
Yep.
Right click on it, and there should be an option there for redefine sketch plane. So right click on it.
Right click.
Yep.
Offset plane?
Offset plane's a little different.
Yeah. I know how to right click.
Do you, Brad?
Oh, right click. It's a joke.
The other one, right?
I thought, oh, that's not right.
Is that the other last?
Hold
Stop.
on.
Is that just a shitty
You're on the
sketch?
left.
This one?
Yeah.
Do I have to have an extra sketch?
I like when my computer
Who has internet?
Don't bring your frying computer.
I can feel the breeze off those fans.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. So, see that option there that says redefine sketch plane?
Stop.
Yes.
Right, click on that,
3D print that
and
image.
then click on right here where it says
No,
XY.
true.
This is the plane that's down the bottom, okay? Click on that.
True, it's getting worse.
Bam.
So what it does is it takes what you sketched on that plane, and it moves it over to that other
To
plane.
the plane that.
Go ahead and hit
Wait, you have
OK.
the cursed scout on there.
Go ahead and hit OK.
It's wrapping
Nice.
over.
And now you can extrude it, and it'll be
Well,
where you
it's
need it to be.
Well, look at that.
Marcus, you think you can do the same thing?
I just did.
So the hardest part of that whole fix was the Chromecast.
Yes.
Seriously.
So Chromecast was the problem.
I think I did it right.
No, I think your holes are.
No, that's me.
Who's
I
this?
was taking it.
No, it's not
This is you? So you know how to.
You do the same thing?
So
Hey,
let me
Roll,
ask you this,
Roll.
did you put the holes on the top, or did
Doug,
you put
look
the
at
sketch
that.
on the
Measured
wrong
that.
plane?
I can sketch
Wire
on the
hole?
plane,
Do you know how to fix
that's
it?
one
Well,
thing.
not me.
Yeah. Put it in.
Okay, so,
What do you guys
one more
do?
time.
The bottom of the
So
the
you-
circle is 4 from
tool.
the bottom,
Hold on,
and it's
go back
2.5
up.
high, and it's 10 deep.
Alright, 4 from the
Is
bottom,
this the sketch
2.5
where the
high,
flanges
10.
are?
It's like this.
So right click on that,
Dude, there's a sick walker.
redefine sketch plane.
Redefine sketch plane is crazy.
It's freaking insane. It's got,
Did you?
it's got
yeah.
4 joints
And then
double
click on the
joints.
XY plane. Or
Let's
that.
see.
That's almost the same as
Okay, that didn't
Let me
quite
see your
work. So undo that,
Dude, let me see.
redefine the plane, and then
I
click
thought
on
it was-
XY over there.
Nice
On the left, on the left.
Yeah, mine was messed up until I clicked on
Yeah,
X,
yeah,
Y.
yeah.
Juggernaut?
Yeah, XY plane. There you go.
No,
It's one of the first loses they called.
Him and Bandit lost him.
where did you draw your
Now dog
rectangle?
don't have.
Huh?
Can you double click on that sketch?
Dog have.
Doc has.
Or, I mean.
That looks perfectly fine.
Yo.
You finished sketch?
Awesome, bro.
You look like this now?
Ash is still broken.
There's something going on over here.
Yes, there is.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll fix that.
She's very
Okay.
easy to play.
Who, Ash?
Ash.
That's just because she has a simple gadget.
Yes.
And she's
It's an
fast.
And she's so speedy.
Somehow,
Okay.
somehow when I see it, I
So-
just accept that I've lost the fight. I'm just like, okay, yes.
We're getting on, it's almost 8:25.
People just give up as soon as they see.
Okay, so let's pause here for a minute.
I will
That was a
not
lot of
get
talking.
it.
Where are you guys at, right? We went through a bunch of steps for drawing features that were precisely located, right? How are you guys feeling about the stuff that we went over? Did it more or less make sense? Was there anything that was, I know that, we went on a few side trips because you guys are so getting used to the program and some things ended up in unexpected places, but did the actual operations and the kind of the logical flow of what we were doing, did that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So, I know a few of you said that you didn't really have a lot of time to play around with it in the intervening week. Totally understand that. Not trying to give you more homework to do. But, as I said before, the more time you spend in the program, the more fluent you're gonna get at it, okay? So, if you need, an assignment, something to work on, okay? I would ask you to draw, another similar part. Maybe you could redraw the servo mount, but in a different orientation, right? So this holds the servo vertically attached to a frame with the flanges, right? But if you were attaching it to a robot, you might have it coming out 90 degrees, for example. So rather than copying this part verbatim, remodeling it with a twist, basically. Let's see, probably tomorrow or the next day, I'm gonna post a video, into the Discord. Actually, I'm gonna post 2. One is a recap of the stuff that we did today as a reference, right? The other one is gonna be some stuff I'm gonna introduce in the next class. So if you guys wanna get ahead, you can go ahead and watch that video and go through that material. My plan for next class is I'm gonna introduce a couple of things. It'll probably be the content in that video, more or less. And then we're gonna get into, working on your own independent projects, okay? So for the next 2 classes, next week and the week after, I want you guys to have the opportunity to design your own thing. Now, there's a couple of features I would set out to you guys as design constraints, okay? I want you haven't learned yet how to, or you may have learned, but I haven't told you, how to design, how to make a design that has more than one part, okay? So like one part that interfaces with another part, for example. Something that moves, like a hinge, or 2 pieces that bolt together, okay? Yes, that'd be super cool, something that like rotates or pivots.
Screw top, that's what I'm thinking.
Oh boy, okay, you're going deep, yeah. Okay, yep, we can work on that, that's great. So start thinking about something based on what you've learned already, or what you know is possible based on what you might have seen in other 3D models or 3D printed things. Start thinking about something that you want to take the next 2 class periods to design, okay? I'm still going to introduce a little bit of material, but we're going to kind of switch into a mode where you guys are working independently or collaborating. You guys can work together if you want. But you're going to spend the next 2 periods working on your own design, and I'm going to help you kind of problem solve and things like that. So start thinking about that, okay? Let's see. Is there anything else that I wanted to introduce? Let me just check my whiteboard. One second. So, how many of you guys have actually used a 3D printer before? 1, 2, 3. So like maybe half-ish of you, yeah? Okay. So have you guys encountered the need to use support material in printing? Do you guys know what support material is? Okay. If you guys have ever printed something that actually, let's see, where's the part? Let's see. So Ilya was printing this part right here. Oh, actually, this has support attached to it. So there is no orientation that you could print this part in that would not require some sort of support material. Support material is required when you have overhangs, right? You have things that are unsupported hanging out over open space. The software that prepares this job will build the supports required to keep the part from falling over or failing or turning into a pile of spaghetti. One of the things that we're going to talk about at the beginning of next class is designing parts to avoid the need for support material. You can use that as a design consideration and either orient your part a certain way or design it with features that prevent the need for extreme overhangs that require support. You can't always do it, but if you think about your part and you design it and incorporate that, you can reduce your print times a lot. You can use a lot less plastic, and then you don't have to clean up all of this stuff after. But so designing an object that prints without support is one of the constraints I want you guys to think about when you're designing your own objects, right? You're gonna have the opportunity to print something in multiple pieces, orient it any way you want. We're gonna talk about what sort of shapes require support and how to avoid it in the next class, okay? Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up? Jack, do you wanna set up a print before you go?
Yes, please. I don't know how to do that stuff.
All right, if you guys don't have any other questions, I guess we're good. Thank you. We like hacked through a lot of problems today. Thank you guys all for being so patient as we did that. But I kind of feel like troubleshooting in that way is one of the best ways to learn. So.
Yeah.
I have a kind of a personal question. So
a personal question about me or about you?
About more like not related to class.
That's all right. Go ahead.
So I am helping a school with a 3D printer and having trouble with it, and I'm kind of able to use it while I'm working on it. And
Yeah.
the main problem is that it's really cheap and not great. And I thought like I just made like a list of settings that works really well, but the base plate has a problem where it doesn't stick to the base plate. And the way it slides into to hold it, you can't like wrap it with like painter's tape to help make it like more even.
Yeah.
I'm all of the base, not the top.
It has like a weird curve in the bottom that prevents the plate from sliding correctly.
That's
There's like
actually
anything to like try to make it stick better?
Yeah. If you didn't have painter's tape down, what would the surface be?
It's like this supposedly like it's flat, and I think it's supposed to be designed to hold on to the material, but it doesn't very well.
Okay. So things you can try besides painter's tape, you can use a thin layer of glue stick, so that's got PVA in it, which both ABS and PLA stick to, and it cleans up easy just with water. So I would try that instead of painter's tape.
Okay.
You can also use things like hairspray, but I don't like to use that because it gets everywhere. So I would try the glue stick first. If that doesn't work, take a picture of it, and we'll look at it together next class.
Is it supposed to be flush with this, or is it
It's
just
not. It's not. It's not.
Print's not sticking to the build plate. So painter's tape is kind of best, but if you can't do that, then use a glue stick. A thin layer, like super thin.
So you did you draw it with the rectangle?
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, I drew it on this surface.
Are you good?
Oh, two different ways.
Thanks.
Same result.
Gamer mouse.
Yeah.
That's advanced piracy. Just printing a watermark is advanced.
Oh, okay. Let me take a picture of it.
You just print the watermark.
Did I miss the thing where you're supposed to park?
Where did you park?
I parked like up against that building.
Yeah, so that's actually okay, but they're just a little bit more. So the further sort of into the building part you can go.
That's what I did tonight.
Yeah, the less they sort of go into the building. But it's okay, we can figure it out.
Alright, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
You just go to school and be like, problem is.
Okay, so what's the easiest way for you to get the model files to me?
Yeah.
Where do you have them now?
No, I've done that.
Okay, can you fill them in the display?
No, and it's like scan it early, it's like 1 minute.
Files that are over megabytes, but I can
Oh, was
Okay, you can drop in an email.
if you meet
Well, there's so
Yes.
many.
Thank you for today.
You are
There's so
very
many
welcome.
different.
I'll see you
The
next week.
problem is there's like
Um,
24,000 triangles in one of the models. So
It's kind of big.
it's a big thing, and I don't know like.
Well, 8 meg, did you say 8 meg?
this is what yours looks like.
Actually, I don't even know where it's saved, to be honest.
Okay.
Where does it
Is that left or right?